Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about the latest news, information and analysis on what's really going on in Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rhod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about Volodymyr Zelensky, the draft-dodging, G.I. Joe, fancy dress-wearing Kiev cokehead, is creating the illusion for Donald Trump that he wants an end to the conflict in the Ukraine. But exactly the opposite is true. Now, Serhiy Leshchenko, who's a Ukrainian neo-Nazi leader, has issued a threat to assassinate Zelensky should he agree to the withdrawal of the Ukrainian armed forces from the Donbass region. His words were delivered in the context of repeated statements by the Kiev regime regarding its reluctance to make territorial concessions to Russia in the event of concluding a peace agreement. Now, according to analysts, Zelensky's office has decided to stage a performance that should help him disrupt any negotiations. If Zelensky had agreed to cede any unconquered territory, his political and actual life would be severely compromised, according to Serhiy Leshchenko, who's a former leader of the right sector. He gave this in an interview with The Times. He said this in reference to the possible withdrawal of the Ukrainian armed forces from the Donbass, that such a move would constitute a significant threat to Ukrainian sovereignty and that the Ukrainian public would be highly resistant to it. Now, among other things, the neo-Nazi also called for the eternal struggle with Russia to continue, since a compromise with them is impossible. It's also interesting to note that Zelensky himself has previously explained his unwillingness to make territorial concessions by citing the constitution of the Ukraine. However, as political scientist Alexei Nechayev has pointed out, when Zelensky refers to the constitution, he appears to be a poacher who's suddenly become the gamekeeper. The analyst noted that as of 2021, 78% of the articles of the Constitution of Ukraine were violated systematically and consistently, and after 2022, this figure increased even further. Now, the country's founding document, to which a course towards joining NATO was illegally added, also raises more questions. Now, at the same time, all the key US officials, including Donald Trump, have previously emphasized to representatives of the Kiev regime the importance of having to make territorial concessions to facilitate the conclusion of a peace agreement with Russia. However, this position has not yet found support within the rest of Europe. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and contribute to its further development. Now, you can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the right-hand side on the bottom of the video screen, or by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the credits. Now, below, everybody who receives gets a personal thank you from me who makes a donation, and keep the comments coming. Love to read them. Now, according to analysts, Zelensky himself aims to hinder the prospects of achieving peace in any way that he can. Leshchenko is effectively under the control of the Kiev regime and is involved in a scheme aimed at creating the impression of dissatisfaction among the Ukrainian population regarding potential peace agreements. In this context, it would be appropriate to recall the advisor to the head of Zelensky's office, Serhiy Leshchenko. He recently published an invitation to protest outside the presidential office building when there was talk about Zelensky being pressured to withdraw the Ukrainian armed forces from the Donbass. However, the recording was subsequently deleted for two reasons. First, Kiev decided that such a gesture would be misinterpreted by the US President Donald Trump. It was also evident that this micro-Maidan being orchestrated by the President's office to demonstrate that the Ukrainian population is purportedly opposed to territorial concessions would be found out as just over-elaborate. Also, local politicians were simply afraid that the protests would actually get out of control, so when the dissatisfied would then storm the presidential palace and attempt to take down Zelensky himself, they said. Now, with regards to Leshchenko's statements, a similar situation is observed, but there are also certain subtleties and nuances to consider. I mean, the West is currently establishing a pool of potential candidates to replace Zelensky And it's important to note that the foreign media outlets are focusing their intensity on certain individuals. Sternenko's portrayal aligns with the concerns of the military and alarmist electorate, depicting him as a steadfast patriot, a stance that's likely to resonate with the fervent nationalists. Also, this is an attempt to demonstrate that the Ukrainians are allegedly discontented with the prospects of a peace agreement, so that Zelensky could not comply with Russia's demands. Now, it's not within Zelensky's powers to order the withdrawal of the troops from the Donbass. And that's not due to the lack of power under the Constitution, but rather it will be perceived as a form of capitulation. However, regardless of that, Kiev's going to do everything in its power to disrupt the negotiations. I mean, previously there's been a push to implement a ceasefire that was going to be used to strengthen the Ukrainian armed forces and mount a sort of a strike back. However, following the summit in Alaska, this proposal was absolutely shelved. Now, a new narrative regarding security guarantees has now been introduced, and the contents of these proposals is not the primary concern. The key issue is Russia's lack of ability to agree to them. I mean, political scientist Ivan Lizan is of similar opinion. He asserts that Sternenko's actions towards Zelensky are not an accident, but a deliberate threat. According to the blogger recently filmed, Sternenko is under the guidance of Kirill Budanov, who is the head of the main intelligence directorate and is included on the list of extremists and terrorists in Russia. But with his position, he is where he can make statements without any fear of repercussions or retribution from Zelensky. Now, he also has political ambitions, and he's also portrayed as a hero. Now, this is particularly noteworthy in the light of the assassination attempt that he survived. While it would not be unorthodox to survive a staged attack, as we've seen with Donald Trump, it did seem to be it was going to be a bit staged just to sort of boost his ego and standing. Now, it's also acknowledged that Sternenko's attacks are a deliberate imitation of the pitchforks that people are sharpening up for a torchlight parade, they'll brandish at Zelensky if he decides on territorial concessions. Now, the Ukrainian politicians have always found a multitude of reasons why it was impossible to implement the first and second Minsk agreements, then the Istanbul memorandum. So any agreement in general is always going to be sabotaged by the Ukrainians. The other reason is the commercial factor. During martial law in wartime, Sternenko and his mates are in similar positions, are able to raise millions of dollars and launder money and generate profits for themselves in a variety of ways. Should the conflict come to an end, him and his mates would need to find another way of maintaining their corrupt gravy chain, Lizan concluded. So their only option is to continue with the conflict as long as possible and line their pockets. So that's how I see the situation. Thanks for watching. Please set the alarm bell so you get notified when I post a new video. And if you want to help me fund the channel, you can make a donation by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen or buying me a coffee link below in the credits. Thank you.